this week. I'm joined now by Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator, thank you for joining us this morning. There's obviously been a lot of hand-wringing over how Democrats treated the State of the Union address. Let me read you what your colleague in the Senate, John Fetterman, had to say. He called the Democratic response a sad cavalcade of cell phones and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. We're becoming the metaphorical car alarms that nobody pays attention to, and it may not be the winning message. Does Senator Fetterman have a point?
Well, I think the lack of a coordinated response to the State of the Union was a mistake. And frankly, it took the focus off of where it should have been, which is on the fact that the president spoke for an hour and 40 minutes and had nothing to say about what he would do to bring down costs for American families that were watching that lengthy address, sitting at the kitchen table, hoping that he would offer something to help them afford a new home or pay the rent, to afford health care or child care. There was nothing in it for the American people, and that's where we need to keep our focus. I was just listening to your guest precede me, trying to explain that these tariffs, these on-again, off-again tariffs, are not about trade. It's a drug war, but next month it's a trade war, but now it's a drug war. It was incomprehensible, and he was also trying to say that job numbers that came in less than expected are somehow good news. They're destroying the economy, and they're making it harder and harder for Americans to afford things. That's where we need to keep the focus. That's why we lost the last election, because we weren't laser focused on the high cost of living. And what they're doing now is just making it so much worse in the administration, and that's really what we need to emphasize.
You've made it clear you're opposed to these tariffs. Is there anything the Democrats can do to stand in the way?
Well, look, I think we need to bring home to the American people what these tariffs are going to mean. They voted for Donald Trump supposedly because they wanted lower prices, and these tariffs are just going to drive prices up. I think they already are. In California, the top issue for people is they need more housing. They need more affordable housing. Well, if you begin by deporting construction workers and then you continue by raising costs on construction materials like lumber, you're just driving those housing prices even further beyond the means of most Americans. So this is deeply destructive, what they're doing. We need to make that case to the American people, because they're going to feel it. But, taking our eye off the ball, I think, is very dangerous. And so let's be focused on what matters most to Americans. Let's point out all the destructive harms they're doing with, the cutting of services, the slashing of Medicaid, and what that's going to mean for increased health costs and less access for people. That, to me, is the winning case to make.
I'm going to be talking shortly to UAW President Shawn Fain. He was obviously, big supporter of Kamala Harris, prominent speaker at your Democratic convention over the summer. He likes Trump's tariffs. Is there a risk that in your opposition to this, and I mean you, the party's opposition to this, the Democrats could lose even more ground among working-class Americans?
Look, I read Shawn's statement. I think he doesn't favor tariffs if they're about drug or unrelated policy. And I think it may make sense to look at targeted actions that we can take to bring back American jobs, like auto jobs. But these across-the-board tariffs that are indiscriminate, that are imposed one day and taken down the next, I can tell you the effect that they're having in California, because I talked to people, I talked to citrus farmers, for example, who still haven't recovered the market share they lost during the first Trump administration with these tariff wars. So I think these broad indiscriminate and on-again, off-again tariffs don't help anyone. They don't help farmers. They don't help auto workers. They're a mistake.
I mean, we'll talk to him in a few minutes, but I mean, he seemed to be saying that he favored these, broad tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and also didn't seem troubled by the one-month pause. But let me ask you more broadly on the Democratic response. Here's what James Carville had by way of suggestion to how Democrats should handle this moment. It was somewhat counterintuitive. He said, with no clear leader to voice our opposition and no control in any branch of government, it's time for Democrats to embark on the most daring political maneuver in the history of our party: roll over and play dead. Allow Republicans to crumble beneath their own weight and make the American people miss us. Is that a possible course of action?
I have great respect for James Carville, but I don't agree with him on this. I do think that the abundant corruption of the Trump administration, the self-dealing, the inconsistency, the economic decline that they're advancing with their inconsistent and haphazard policies, yes, will cause the administration to collapse of its own weight. But that's, I think, first of all, not an answer to what Democrats need to do, which is we need to have our own broad, bold agenda to improve the economic well-being of Americans, to answer really the central question, I think, at the heart of our political challenges, which is, if you're working hard in America, can you still earn a good living? We need to be advancing policies and making the arguments about what we have to offer, not simply standing back and letting them collapse of their own corrupt weight.
Yep.
To me, that's not enough. We need to effectively use litigation as we are. We need to effectively use communication to talk to new people in new ways as we are. So I don't agree with that philosophy.
One approach we're seeing from your governor, from Gavin Newsom, he's got this new podcast. He made some waves by bringing conservative commentator Charlie Kirk on the debut of his podcast. Let me play you a little section on this.
Would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness.
So
it's deeply unfair. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well.
I mean, I guess first, what did you think about Newsom sitting down with Charlie Kirk? But more importantly, do you agree with those in your party who say it is time for Democrats to have a different approach to transgender issues?
Well, first of all, I agree that we should be broadening our reach and talking to people we haven't been talking to. I'm not sure that I would start with Charlie Kirk. But I also think, as I was mentioning earlier, that we need to keep the focus on what matters most to the American people, and that is the economy. We need to be talking to people about how we're going to improve their quality of life, how we can make sure that if they're working hard, they're earning a good living. To the degree that we get away from focusing on those things, I think it's a mistake. In terms of the particular issue that the governor was talking about, look, I played in sports, our kids played in sports. I want all young people to have the experience of playing in sports, every young person, and I want those sports to be fair. I want those sports to be safe. And I have confidence that local schools and local communities can make those decisions without the federal government making them for them.
But is he right on that? Is he right on that?
I think to the degree, though, I think as a political matter, that we remove the focus from where most Americans are concerned, and that is they're concerned about their ability to provide for their family. I think to the degree that we get away from that, that's a mistake.
Okay, all right. Senator Schiff, thank you very much for joining us on This Week.